You are standing in front of the bulletproof glass of your executive office. The city stretches out below you, an infinite grid of glittering lights pulsing in the dark. You are 42 years old. You are wearing a tailored silk suit that costs more than what your parents earned in a decade of hard labor. To the voters, to the media, and to the millions of citizens watching your career, you are a beacon of absolute hope. You are the first woman to reach this level of executive power in your region. They call you a reformer. They call you the future. But as you look down at the streets you supposedly govern, your hands are trembling. You press your palms flat against the cold glass, desperately trying to make the shaking stop. You are the most powerful woman in the state, and you have absolutely zero power over your own life. You are a masterpiece of public relations, entirely funded and operated by the shadows. It did not start with a grand cinematic betrayal. It started with simple, suffocating mathematics. 10 years ago, you were a brilliant, idealistic lawyer. You spent your days fighting for forgotten communities, representing people who had been crushed by the system. You believed the government was fundamentally broken, and you believed you possessed the exact moral clarity required to fix it. You decided to run for local office as mayor. You had the passion, you had the grassroots support. But ideals do not print campaign flyers. Honesty does not buy primetime television airwaves. 3 weeks before the election, you were trailing by 15 points. You were exhausted, heavily in debt, and watching your lifelong dream slowly evaporate into nothing. Then came the dinner at the exclusive steakhouse. A man named Vargas invited you. He presented himself as a regional agricultural entrepreneur. He was elegant, soft-spoken, and treated you with profound respect. He told you he believed in your vision for the city. He handed you a leather briefcase. Inside was the exact amount of capital you needed to saturate the media and secure your victory. Millions of pesos in untraceable cash. He asked for nothing in return. Just a promise to keep an open mind regarding future city development. You took the briefcase. You rationalized the decision instantly. You told yourself that you would use their money to get into power, and then you would do so much good that the origin of the funds would not matter. That is the universal lie of the corrupt. The fairy tale you whisper to your own conscience to help you sleep. You won the election. You celebrated with your family, genuinely believing you had outsmarted the machine. You did not realize that the machine had just purchased you at a permanent discount. The illusion of your independence lasted exactly 4 days into your administration. Vargas visited your new municipal office. He did not bring congratulations. He brought a piece of paper. It contained 3 names, one for your chief of police, one for your director of public works, one for your head of transit. You looked at him, the cold, heavy reality finally settling into your stomach. You tried to argue. You mentioned your campaign promises about transparency. Vargas simply smiled, a thin, mechanical expression that failed entirely to reach his eyes. "Madam Mayor," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We bought the stage. We decide the casting. Sign the appointments today, or your political career and your personal peace end before the weekend." You signed the papers. That was the exact moment your soul detached from your body. Within a month, you understood exactly what you had facilitated. The municipal police suddenly developed strategic blind spots. The southern highway was left entirely unpatrolled between midnight and 4 in the morning. The heavy transport vehicles rolling through the dark were not carrying agricultural supplies. They were moving the organization's highly sensitive merchandise. You looked the other way. You told yourself it was a necessary compromise. You told yourself that with the rest of the municipal budget, you could build parks, repave streets, and improve schools. You wrapped your corruption in public service, hoping the scale of morality would eventually balance. It never balances. Your popularity skyrocketed. The city flourished visually. What the public did not know was that every single infrastructure contract was awarded to a network of shell companies controlled by Vargas. You were no longer just a mayor. You were the organization's most efficient financial washing machine. A public hospital project that cost $5 million was invoiced at $20 million. The difference was clean, legitimate revenue for the Underworld. You became the golden child of your political party. They pushed you to run for governor. The gubernatorial campaign required 50 times the capital. Vargas provided it without a single hesitation. The organization completely saturated the state. They bought radio stations. They flooded social media with engineered propaganda bots. They visited your political opponents in the middle of the night, offering them a simple choice between dropping out of the race or facing a permanent resolution. Your strongest opponent withdrew the next morning, citing sudden family health issues. You won the election by the largest margin in the history of the state. You stood on the balcony of the governor's palace, raising your hands to thousands of cheering citizens. Your husband stood beside you, smiling with absolute pride. Your children waved flags. You felt like a total fraud, a puppet performing in a theater where the strings were completely soaked in dirty money. As governor, the requests escalated from administrative favors to deep structural complicity. You no longer just assigned police chiefs. You vetoed legislation that threatened the organization's logistics. You manipulated the state budget to ensure the cartel's primary routes were maintained with public funds. You sat in meetings with legitimate foreign investors by day and answered an encrypted burner phone by night. You learned to speak the cold, corporate language of the shadows. You referred to massive illegal operations as special logistics. You called extortion unofficial taxation. You sanitized pure horror with bureaucratic vocabulary. The psychological terror became a permanent state of existence. You stopped sleeping deeply. Every time a dark vehicle idles outside your residence for more than 30 seconds, your heart accelerates to 150 beats per minute. You suspect everyone, your chief of staff, your driver, your security detail. You know that the heavily armed men protecting you are actually wardens assigned by Vargas. They report your every movement. They record your private conversations. You are a highly paid prisoner in a historic mansion. You cannot take a walk in the park. You cannot visit a coffee shop. You move through the world in an armored convoy, staring at the citizens you swore to protect through 3 inches of bulletproof glass. The breaking point arrives in your 3rd year in office. A brilliant, relentless young female journalist starts connecting the invisible dots. She follows the money from your flagship public transit project directly to a phantom corporation in the Caribbean. She is smart, independent, and completely fearless. She requests an official interview. She sends your press secretary a list of questions that makes the blood freeze solid in your veins. She has the evidence. If she publishes the story, your administration collapses, and you will face decades in a federal concrete box. But worse, the organization's entire financial structure in the region will be exposed. Panic consumes your rational mind. You make the call you will regret for the rest of your natural life. You contact Vargas on the encrypted line. You tell him about the journalist. You tell him she is becoming a critical liability. You do not ask him to hurt her. You simply ask him to handle the situation. 3 days later, the news breaks. The journalist was involved in a tragic high-speed car accident on a mountain road. Her vehicle burned completely. The documents in her car burned with it. The state police, your state police, rule it a mechanical failure and close the investigation in 48 hours. You sit in your luxurious executive office watching the news report on a flat-screen television. You realize the absolute, suffocating horror of your own words. You did not pull a weapon, but your phone call ended a life. You are an executioner wearing a designer dress. You lock the door to your office, slide down the mahogany wood to the floor, and weep until your vision blurs. You weep for the brave journalist, and you weep for the idealistic lawyer you used to be. She is permanently dead, too. The invisible weight begins to crush your personal life. Your husband notices the changes. He notices the midnight calls. The sudden accumulation of offshore wealth, the terrifying men who now guard your children's schools. He connects the anomalies. One night, he confronts you in the master bedroom. He asks you directly if you are controlled by the shadows. You look into his eyes and you lie with the flawless, terrifying precision of a sociopath. You tell him it is just the intense pressure of the office. But he knows. He takes your children and moves to a different country the following month. He claims it is for their education. You know the absolute truth. It is to keep them out of the blast radius of your decisions. You let them go because you know he is right. Your proximity is toxic. You traded your family for your political survival. You are now entirely, utterly alone. You try to resign. You summon Vargas to a discreet, neutral location. Quote, you tell him you are exhausted. You tell him you have provided enough value, and you want to step down for health reasons. Vargas does not yell. He does not threaten you with physical violence. He calmly pours himself a glass of sparkling water, takes a slow sip, and looks at you with absolute pity. Madam Governor, he says, his voice cold and entirely flat, you do not seem to understand the architecture of our arrangement. You are not an employee who can hand in a resignation letter. You are a strategic asset. You know our routing systems. You know our banking protocols. You know the names of 20 other politicians on our payroll. If you leave the office, you lose your institutional immunity. If you lose your immunity, you become a vulnerability, and we do not allow vulnerabilities to breathe. He leans forward, the silence in the room pressing against your eardrums like physical weight. You will finish your term perfectly, and then you will run for the Senate. You belong to us until the day we decide you are no longer useful. He leaves the room. You do not move for an hour. The reality of your existence finally locks into place. You return to the present moment. The city lights continue to pulse below your window. Tomorrow morning, you will announce your candidacy for the highest office in the nation. The crowds will cheer. The international media will call you a trailblazer. Millions of young women will look up to you as a symbol of empowerment, integrity, and progress. They will cast their votes for you, desperately believing you are fighting for their future. They do not know that their champion is a ghost. They do not know that every speech you give is vetted by the Underworld. They do not know that your entire existence is a meticulously orchestrated stage play designed to keep the shadows invisible and highly profitable. You wanted to change the world. You wanted to wield the power of the state to help the forgotten. Instead, you became the ultimate, highly efficient tool for the very monsters who keep the people in the dark. You turn away from the window. You adjust your silk collar. You practice the perfect, confident smile that has won you millions of votes. You walk out of your office surrounded by heavily armed bodyguards you do not trust, heading toward a podium to deliver another beautiful, empty lie. You have reached the absolute pinnacle of success. You have the world at your feet. And you have never been more thoroughly imprisoned, because in the cold, unforgiving world of dirty money, the highest political throne is simply the most expensive cage.